Hi everybody, and welcome to today's ISE webinar. We've got a great session lined up. I've got some couple of really good speakers that we're going to hear from. One of whom is Lindsey Pollak, who is very well known to recruiters in the States, maybe less so over here. I last saw Lindsey speak in the US, so really pleased to have Lindsey on the webinar. But we'll do introductions in a minute. If you haven't logged on to an ISE webinar, let me just give you a quick idea a quick rundown of how it's going to work. You'll find all your microphones are turned off. That's because the number of participants we've got, it's quite difficult to track people. Everybody starts talking over each other, but we really want your interaction. So you'll see a questions dialogue box on the platform. So as we go along, if you want to type in your questions, what I will do is I'll keep a track of those questions. Nicky and Lindsey will be chatting for roughly sort of 40-45 minutes, and we've left a good quarter of an hour for questions at the end of it. So please be sure to feed those questions through. We do make a point of getting to them and leaving time for them. This webinar is recorded, so you can go back to the webinar afterwards to catch up on anything that you want to revisit. Also, we encourage you to share our webinars. We have a new Insights Hub that we launched earlier this week, and this webinar will go on to there later on today, if not tomorrow morning. Throughout the COVID crisis, we've made it a matter of policy to make much of our content available to everybody. So even if you aren't an ISE member, or you know people who would benefit from hearing some aren't ISE members, please feel free to share links from them. So that's enough from me. I'll come back on at the end and be the questions moderator, but now it's time to hand over to the people that you really want to hear from. That's from Nicky and Lindsey. So Nicky, so I'll hand over to you.
Thanks very much, Stephen, and thank you ISE for giving us the chance to speak today. As you can see from the slides, the focus is about actionable advice to attract and hire more diverse talent. And it's based on some research that Lindsey and I have been conducting in recent months, and that research was entitled 2020 Strong. So I'm going to introduce myself and Lindsey. I want to tell you first of all that this is the first presentation I've given in an office in the last 6 months, and it's the first presentation in my entire life I've given with a plastic chair covering. I don't know if you can see that. So this is certainly something of the new existence that we have. I will be detailing everything in sight after this. So for those of you that don't know me, my name's Nicky Garcea, and I'm one of the co-founders of Cappfinity. Helped to set the business up a long time ago now. And our business is very much focused on helping to support individuals and organisations with a focus on talent acquisition, development and transformation. And in everything we do, we bring very much a strengths-based lens. I first met Lindsey when I was at New York University presenting to employers and students about strengths. And I gave my introduction and I sat down in the audience, and I'd known Lindsey for her books, but I hadn't heard her speak. And one of the things that really struck me when I listened to her speak was, one, she's a fantastic speaker, but two things. I thought, wouldn't it be incredible to be able to collaborate on something, which this year has given us a chance to do. But I also felt very committed that I would encourage Lindsey to speak to the ISE membership group. So I'm delighted to have that opportunity today. Lindsey will speak to this far more fluently than I will, but one of the things that struck me when we talk about diversity and attraction is that Lindsey's work really calls out some of the differences that are there generationally. And I had got clients at the time when I was hearing Lindsey speak who probably sometimes thought that younger people were maybe not as resilient and not as strong as more experienced people in their workforce. And what I learned through her presentation was that actually an appreciation of the differences that we all have generationally can lead to a greater harmony, but also a great level of understanding. So I'm going to hand over to Lindsey now to introduce herself, and then we are going to be delighted to share the findings of our research together.
Nicky, thank you for such a warm introduction. It's such an honor to be presenting with you and to partner with Cappfinity This is my ISE debut. So Stephen, thank you for inviting me to present. I thought I'd give a little bit more background on what I've done and how I've gotten here. I really feel such a calling at this moment. If you look at my background and some of the books I've written, I am based in New York, as Nicky mentioned, and I found myself laid off and job hunting in the aftermath of 9/11 in 2001 in New York City, here in the United States. And the experience of that has really stuck with me, and I think has some alignment with what a lot of students are going with today. I graduated in 1998 from graduate school, had a job for a while, and then was in that situation. That prompted me to write my first book, Getting from College to Career, for young professionals, which led me to your counterpart in the United States, NACE, the National Association of Colleges and Employers, who really embraced me as an outside voice. I also became a spokesperson for LinkedIn for 6 years and taught students and career services professionals how to use the professional social network to advance the careers of young people. My second book, Becoming the Boss, was addressing the fact that the millennial generation were growing up and becoming leaders themselves. And as my work advanced, as Nicky mentioned, I started to address these generational differences globally in the world, that for the first time in history, we have 5 distinct generations working side by side. People are living and working a lot longer into their lives, and that's created new dynamics. And I think we're seeing that now more than ever, as the economy and the challenges of COVID are really throwing these multi-generational differences into the story more. A couple of months ago, I started writing my 4th book, which features Stephen Isherwood and much about Cappfinity for people who are finding themselves in a period of recalculation today because of the pandemic and the economic and racial justice crises. Which is about navigating one's career through challenging times. That book will be coming out in March, but a lot of the research that we're going to be talking about today has really fed into that book, what individuals can do to advance their careers in this new normal that we find ourselves in, what university career professionals can do to support the next generation, and of course, what employers can do to make sure that people are launching and advancing their careers in a positive way. So again, thank you to ISE, thank you to all of you. I am an American, but as Nicky knows, my 9-year-old daughter is an avid Harry Potter fan. She fancies herself a Hermione Granger and practices her English accent frequently with Nicky. So she is just over the moon that I am presenting to a group of Brits today, and I'm just delighted to be with you. Nicky, back to you. Thank you.
I did spend some of this week explaining to Lindsey what a crumpet was. So, and I mean that in the food sense. Lindsey, I'll explain the connotation later. So, okay. Project goals. There were 3 things in this research that Lindsey and I were focused on, and the wider teams who were supporting us. The first of all was to explore the changed university recruitment landscape and to really learn from the collective wisdom of organisations across industries and regions. The second was to help support employers in attracting, recruiting and onboarding diverse talent, and particularly at the times that people were facing. And we really want to draw out the learning and the tips that we can give you. And then the final piece was to strengthen candidate outcomes now and into the future, and that's something that we hope that our ideas will give you as you look forward to everything that you want to achieve over the next 12 months. So the methodology that we were focused on was actually one of qualitative research. At Cappfinity, we do many things that are quantifiable and numerical and survey driven. But Lindsey and I thought there would be great merit to hear the narrative and the stories that we could hear from global heads of talent. So we have taken over 50 hours of interviewing, many more hours coding up the interviews and sharing the themes across these sectors and across these countries globally. Over 100 hours of content has been analysed, and what it gives us today to share with you is 10 actionable takeaways. And what we want to do is take this research and give you ideas for things that you can do to continue to attract and recruit and hopefully onboard diverse talent.
So as Nicky mentioned, we organized this presentation for you into real actions that you can take either in a university or as an employer. And Nicky, if you click over to the first one, what we really wanted to start with is we're very concerned that young people are going to take themselves out of the job market because of the narrative that there are no jobs, that nobody is hiring, that the economy is terrible. And so much of our research was really informed by some of the experiences that many of you had during the global financial crisis. I mentioned 9/11, and even back further in looking at what happens in these economic crises and how students need to be encouraged that recruitment is open for business. And I'll share some of the direct quotations that we heard from our interviews to give you some flavor of how some of your counterparts are thinking about this. My worry for students is, and there's evidence this happened in the financial crash, they assume the labor market is dead and nobody is recruiting, so they just totally disengage. 50% of UK entry-level employers didn't fill all their vacancies in 2009. They weren't getting people to apply to those jobs. It won't be easy for students this year and next year, but it might be better than they think. By the way, if you have alumni or friends who are job hunting, this is really across the board. Just yesterday, I heard a speaker from a website called ZipRecruiter who said that, yes, of course, there was a huge downturn, 75% fewer jobs available since COVID started. But as they start to tick up with more openings, the applications have not gone up as well. They're actually down applications by 20%. Even as more jobs are available. So job seekers are taking themselves out of the search because they're intimidated. We need to make sure that does not happen. Whenever we've stopped hiring, this is from an employer, it has killed our program 5 years later. We don't have trained talent in the marketplace, and we don't have the bench in place for important positions. A real danger among employers if they stop hiring entirely because of the economy or because of uncertainty. When they look at their talent pipeline in a few years, it's just not there. We heard this from many people. This is just one representative quotation. Interesting comparison with the financial crisis. The tone among employers is quite different. There's not an industry to blame. The pandemic and racial justice crisis are such huge social issues. Those that are going out and aggressively selling are not going down well. People have to be very careful with their tone. I've actually heard this among students. They are paying attention to what you are doing right now, what you are saying right now, how you are behaving, especially in the United States with the Black Lives Matter movement, which is obviously spread globally. They are very much judging organizations, not just for their hiring, but for how they are handling every aspect of the health crisis and the racial justice crisis.
And picking up on that, our second action is around maximising recruitment and branding opportunities, particularly at these times. One of the things that we heard was there is a network of employers to support students. I'm in touch with other recruiters to see what companies are who are actually rescinding offers and not going to hire. Then I can refocus on getting their students. One recruiter from another company told me all of their offers were being rescinded, so she's sending them to us. So we're seeing people looking at new ways to ensure that they can bring people into their pipeline, even if it wasn't what they were used to doing. A massive benefit potentially of being virtual coming through here for smaller businesses. Increased virtual recruiting will create an avenue for companies that don't have large teams and can't go to every campus. We heard this multiple times, that organisations that perhaps had embraced doing things differently virtually, possibly for drivers of efficiency prior to the pandemic, were now benefiting because they were able to actually get greater reach by virtue of the things that they had trialed. Something to consider, again, to ensure that people actually know the jobs exist. It's easy to recruit for the super sexy roles that all students want, but then there are those roles we don't have to do a lot of work, that we have to do a lot of work to get interest in, such as working in credit call centre. Those are going to be really hard to sell if we can't be on the quad to build relationships with students and sell those jobs. So we're really having to be innovative and think differently to ensure that if we can't be in person, that we will get in front of the students that we want. As the global head of recruiting, I would normally go to a couple of live ID events to meet 20 or 50 interns and students, but next week we're going to deliver a new virtual experience to a much larger audience to get our message out broadly. We heard from the most senior heads of talent that actually they were able to speak to a far greater group and attract greater diversity actually by being virtual, but it was about maximizing their opportunity and thinking creatively. And then finally, there is no better time for students to see an organization's true culture as they watch businesses work through a global crisis. Businesses' actions today will live on in the memory of students for the years to come.
And I think the same is true for career services. Our third actionable takeaway is for universities. And one of the most exciting things I found in our research is how much more sharing there can be globally among the various university career centers in sharing ideas and creative strategies and innovations with one another for getting through this crisis and supporting students. So we wanted to share some of those with you. This one was from the US. A good number of career centers had been in a reactive state when it came to the final months of graduation. But during COVID, many became proactive to support students in every which way they possibly could. For example, career centers sent personalized messages to every graduating student. Some went as far as to use their customer relationship management software to put details about what they've been talking to those students about. Students were engaging back in numbers those career centers haven't seen before. So there's no reason that you couldn't have been personalized before COVID, but the idea came out of the necessity of supporting students in this effort. And I was really gratified by the career center's desire to share their good ideas with one another globally so that we could support as many students as possible. Here's another example. Career Services needs to change the career fair model. I'm okay with a career fair virtually or in person, but make it focused on more meaningful connections for the employer and the students. It needs to be more tailored. Again, that personalization theme kept coming up. Let's keep that going even when we can go back to campus. One size fits none on virtual career fairs. So a real desire to make sure students are being matched with the right potential employers and vice versa. And finally, collaboration. I want to team up with other companies in my industry or local area to make the virtual experience positive for students this fall. So this is how employers can get together and come to career services with innovative ideas. Let's come together as companies and career services so a student can talk to 3 or 4 companies at once or 3 to 4 industries at once. I think we have to be open-minded going into the fall and help students not be inundated by a swirling of different organizations competing for their time. There's a real concern about Zoom fatigue or video fatigue among students who are going to feel like all they're doing is logging in and seeing these faces and companies speaking to them. How can we manage that so the students don't become overwhelmed?
And then our fourth theme spoke very explicitly to looking at this opportunity to drive diversity, equity, and inclusion. And many of the recruiters mentioned to us that actually they had been urged to experiment during these times And in looking to experiment, they were thinking differently about how to reach out to diverse candidates, to individuals that perhaps they might not have been able to recruit previously. So a number of quotes to this point. This gives us the opportunity. I've been yearning to have a more inclusive top of the funnel. I am refocusing recruiters, executives and alumni to spend time mentoring diverse talent rather than just delivering campus presentations. One of the heads of talent that we spoke to said that whilst their numbers were recruiting, they were seeing this as an opportunity to be able to build stronger relationships and mentor talent to ensure that their pipeline was going to be secure into the future. We have been keen to focus on making sure that our managers are prepared with resources to onboard new hires and making sure that the hires get assimilated. We are placing a lot of emphasis on the importance of belonging. This is far beyond a new employee's tech needs. We can make sure we are creating a culture that welcomes them in, even though we are not together in person. And very thoughtful organisations are very focused on this aspect of belonging. This quote here is about the onboarding process and ensuring that diverse hires have that sense of belonging, but we are hearing more broadly people reaching out and creating greater belonging through attraction and the recruitment process. Two things that I'm going to speak to now actually really close to our work at Cappfinity. And one of these is around being explicit about what you're assessing. One of the individuals said, be explicit about what you're assessing. Don't let candidates guess. Be clear, upfront and supportive to help ensure the most diverse talent stays in your process. This really speaks to when you're working on your websites, when you're working on sharing with recruits what you are going to put them through, the criteria that you might be assessing them against, to be upfront and explicit on that criteria. And then finally, from somebody in career services, and I think sometimes maybe not fully realised by everybody, but I am most worried about the students who discount themselves from being not the sort of person we might want to recruit before recruiters have even opened their application processes. And so one of the things that many of the recruiters are focused on is to build confidence in those candidates whilst they're still at university to ensure that actually the applications will be made.
Thanks, Nikki. I hope you're all getting the sense. There was a real sense of positivity and opportunity for experimentation in the interviews, that maybe now we can try things that we hadn't tried before or expand on things that we always thought would be a good idea. Now we have this, obviously nobody wanted this situation, but there is an opportunity in this. And one of those is tip number 5 for all of you, which is to use this as an opportunity to accelerate pilots that you might have started and any technology innovation that you wanted to do but just quite hadn't gotten there. So we have a couple of quotations on this. This is all a pilot, this post-COVID environment. This should inform our ability to create some change in our organization. People are really leaning in right now, and we have leadership's attention and their willingness. So many university recruiting professionals and heads of diversity, equity, inclusion said, I have a seat at the table right now that I didn't have before. And it might be a very short window of time. I want to maximize that opportunity that I have to tell leadership what we need moving forward. So don't waste this opportunity to innovate in this particular moment. And I guess this goes without saying, but I think this person articulated it beautifully. There is no playbook or rules of the road. And some ideas we're going to try won't work. If you're not okay with that, this is going to suck for you. Clearly, this was an American quote. It's not wrong if you try something new and it doesn't work. And to hear these global heads of talent, very senior people in their organizations say, we're going to make some mistakes, we're going to fail, was, I think, really empowering and such an example of growth mindset, which I know so many of us believe in, that this is an opportunity to learn from whatever we do. There is no guaranteed right path. Here's another example. Last year, we changed our model so that we weren't looking to recruit a certain number of students from, quote, target schools. Instead, we changed the idea to target sources, like handshake campaigns. So this gives so much opportunity, to Nicky's point about diversity and inclusion, of finding students and candidates not from where they're based, but from where you are choosing to source them from. And that can be a much more diverse field when you take away the physical location of the university campus. And finally, by adopting an online immersive assessment last year, we've an ability to showcase our company to a more diverse population of talent. Those that might have been reluctant to trial this assessment are now grateful for the strength of our solution. And Nicky, maybe you can jump in on that one from an assessment perspective.
Thanks, Lindsey. One of the things that we're noticing is that organizations that are able to showcase what it's like inside their organization as they go through the assessment process, not just in the marketing, we're finding it is to great benefit, but particularly to attracting a diverse population.
Oh, one more. I'll take this one back. Oh, I love this example. So this was about onboarding in a remote environment. We're creating a virtual manager toolkit. How many touch points, how to advise an intern or new hire to ask questions, etc. We're trying to be very prescriptive in the assigning and evaluating of work. We're level setting how to build virtual relationships and providing icebreakers and activities. I've been an advocate of training managers in how to onboard talent and training managers in how to manage millennial and Generation Z talent for a long time. My hope is that because we're doing it virtually, we're going to provide a lot more manager training and a lot more tools to do that effectively, that I hope will last when we go back to the office or in a hybrid model. So where can you as an employer not just bring in great talent, but ensure that when that talent actually comes on board, managers are ready to make the most of young people in this new environment? We need to give them tools and not just hope that they find ways to do it well.
Thanks, Lindsey. And number 6 is, despite the breadth of examples that we've seen of good work that's happening using technology and innovating with technology, individuals and recruiters that are able to still demonstrate empathy and show a personal touch at these times are finding that very effective, and also that students really need that. A quote that we've taken out, but I was really blown away by, was that during COVID, a telephone interview had become one of the most exciting types of recruitment, because so much had become virtual. So the personal touch of a telephone interview had become really endorsed by recruiters and candidates. But a quote here really speaking to the personal touch. Candidates tell us the thing that makes our firm different is our people. They enjoy the interaction during the recruitment process. That's a competitive advantage that we don't want to lose. That personal connection is what gets us across the line. And I think many recruiters, particularly when recruiting diverse talent at these times, are looking at ways to ensure that that personal touch can be coupled with the virtual technology. I think face-to-face part is vital. We want to meet them and create that connection, because it's too impersonal online. We don't see their passion as much and don't get to know them. Face-to-face will come back, but not in as large ways as it used to be. The face-to-face element of recruiting will probably be quite small, maybe at the final recruitment day. And for many of the people that we support at Cappfinity, this actually for the next 6 months won't happen. So the things that we used to be able to do face-to-face, we're having to rethink in virtual assessment centres, in particular telephone conversations that final stage candidates might have with critical individuals. But this is something that's a massive challenge. All managers of interns and new hires are having a daily virtual morning huddle. We don't want to train them to work normal hours and level set expectations of work. We also want them to have FaceTime with someone from our company first thing every morning. So on the onboarding experience, people are now very much focused on ensuring that there is that virtual personal touch, but people are well taken care of. And finally, in the past, graduates would have had one mentor when they were onboarded, with a budget to take them for lunch or coffee. For the remote internship, we assigned every intern to 4 mentors at different levels, including partner. They will have, well, they have had now 45 virtual conversations each, 45 minutes of virtual conversation each. And what we were hearing through the research, this quote was really not alone, that people were actually getting more exposure to more individuals and more senior individuals by virtue of having to do things virtually. But to the onboarded graduate, to the intern over the summer, that connection and that exposure was really worthwhile for them.
The 7th piece of advice is to be original and have a little bit of fun with this. And I think a lot of Nicky's ideas were showing the creativity and innovation. And a lot of the ideas we're going to share in this tip came from some of the younger employees who had ideas of how to really connect people using technology. It's no secret that a lot of millennials and Generation Zs, the students and recent graduates, are very comfortable building relationships through technology. And we saw some fun examples of that. So I encourage you to borrow or steal some of these and come up with your own. We asked interns what their favorite song is and built a Spotify playlist. That little thing is bringing the spark of connectivity and excitement. I wonder whether it will encourage us to be a little more human in the future. And I have to say, as you know, Nicky and the Cappfinity team and I spent 100 hours on this research, and the #1 question we got was, can I have that Spotify playlist? So that was the biggest takeaway for a lot of people from this research project, of just how simple and creative that idea was. Here's another one. All incoming interns have access to an app personalized to them. Again, that personalization theme, which says we are excited about your arrival. It gives them homework to do, like videos to record and other ways to stay connected with us and each other. So the idea was that the app would create additional sort of water cooler moments in addition to these very formal Zoom meetings that the company was using for their internships and onboarding. We gave our summer interns experiences they could record on their phones again, away from their computers, like taking a video of your apartment as if it's MTV Cribs. We're doing virtual Iron Chef, work from home Olympics, Family Feud, and board game night. Again, simple ideas that can be implemented by any university or employer in a really fun and enjoyable way. And finally, we have a working prototype of a virtual board game. Candidates said it gave them a better understanding of our industry and was more fun than case studies. So even assessment, even the interview process can be gamified a bit and made more enjoyable in a virtual environment.
Thanks, Lindsey. And I mentioned this around the personal touch, but one of the things that was really encouraging, and our hope is that for number 8 this continues, was the level of empathy that we heard. So our tip is to continue to empathize and address mental health. And if I think of all the years, of the last 20 years of recruiting, never have I known a year where this level of empathy and also public acknowledgement of mental health has been so strong by recruiters. And I think it's something that when we think about addressing diversity in all guises, we really urge people to continue to consider and speak to openly. So first of all, in relation to the empathy, communication today is showing the candidates care. The way you treat people, they will remember. You cannot pay attention. You cannot not pay attention to the relationships. That's what you can't ignore. Compassion has been an absolute key We know the start of their career is something special, and we've spent a lot of time thinking about how we're going to make it a rewarding to start virtually. While everyone's working from home, every single employee has to be spoken to and tracked every week. We are hyper-focused on connectivity and having empathy for people who are anxious, overworked, or not near family. I've noticed in the past 6 months, more candidates are more comfortable disclosing a disability. We've never had that before. They'll tell us they need extra time or support or coaching. There's not as much stigma as before. There's been a massive shift since COVID. Everyone has come together as a community and is more empathic. We've created a safer environment to speak up if candidates are not okay and need support. And I think as we move forward into whatever this reality looks like over the next 12 months, it would be incredible to think that that community and empathy, when we've got to keep providing it, is going to be there for candidates to ensure that every candidate has the best opportunity.
And continuing on that theme, one of the differences we saw in the beginning of our research to the later months of our research was that empathy and concern for mental health shifting a bit from students and candidates to ourselves and our own teams, and understanding that this is going to be a very long process and that we need to maintain that empathy and support, especially for people in particularly unique situations like isolation or the loss of loved ones or suffering from different kinds of situations. So tip number 9 is to really be mindful of your team's own energy and capacity. With my recruiting team, I've been saying we have to stay nimble. There isn't a right answer to anything we are doing. I think a lot of people, a lot of professionals and recruiting professionals and career services professionals are worried about their jobs, are worried not just about their students and candidates, but about their own teams and organizations. And we need to provide an environment of positivity and not let people be afraid to fail or make mistakes. I love this. A lot of what we're developing, we hope can be used in the future. I'm part of a team we're calling the New Reality Team. So I think we also saw a shift from March, April, May to now, which is how are we going to get through this crisis to, as Nicky said, this is going to be a very long process, next 12 months or more. How do we think about that future and not just solving the immediacy of this moment, but thinking much more long term? Here comes the empathy for the team. How do you help those who've been working really, really hard over the past few months dealing with this crisis who might have burnout, depression, or exhaustion? Everyone will be that much more exhausted in the next several months. What does leadership look like at that point? We need to be thinking about that now.
And just building on that final quote and moving our final tip and focus to hopefully the positive. So everyone who knows Cappfinity will know how committed we are to allowing students and everyone in the world to harness their strengths. We do that because we know that individuals who can harness their strengths are able to apply for jobs, think that they should apply for jobs, are able to feel more confident, and in some cases go on to be promoted quicker, do better in interviews because they understand what their strengths are. And as we went through the interviews, we heard a number of things that spoke to this, and it also galvanized Cappfinity to create a product and a platform that would allow us to ensure that every student in the world would be able to have access to their strengths. I don't think from a generational perspective, this cohort is going to come out with, I do think from a generational perspective, this cohort is going to come out with different strengths than any other group, particularly resilience. I can share with you in a separate study we did this year where 25,000 people took our strengths profile tool that actually resilience for students is one of the strengths that is slipping slightly. And is taking more energy to deliver. So it's actually something that we need to help people focus in on. We have found that preparing our students to focus on their strengths has given them more confidence and increased their capacity to get through the assessment process. And then finally, back to resilience. Hopefully, this will help them build resilience and make them more flexible and adaptable, the students. Resilience is always what people say grads are missing when we run surveys, what companies would like them to have before they start. This situation happening in their final year of uni might naturally increase their resilience, or it might go the other way. Students may come in with less resilience. Hopefully, they will build resilience, but think of the negative impact on mental health when you can't see a way out. And it was really this quote that has sparked within the business at Cappfinity the desire to be able to give students the opportunity to hopefully build their resilience and also be seen by employers. So I'm delighted to share with you, before we go into the Q&A, a platform that we've created called the Virtual Experience and Evaluation Platform. And this platform will give students 3 things that they can do. The first will be to discover what their strengths are, what their values are, what their learning preferences are, and get feedback, all for no charge. It will also allow them to take modules on strengths that we know are related to career readiness. So resilience is in there, learning agility is there, analysis, and they will be able to take that content, again free of charge, and practice what it is to put that content into practice. And then finally, they will be able to showcase their strengths. And in that showcase, they will be taken through a virtual work experience related to the recruiting employer. And they will be able to then be prioritized by the recruiter into the recruiter's pipeline. So V is something which we have organizations using in order to attract diverse talent. And we also have universities looking to bring V in to support students so that they can be really well prepared. And hopefully that quote that was early on in the presentation, where people take themselves out of the process, that by getting the insight, by developing the strengths, that may happen less. So we'd love to hear from anyone who's interested in piloting V with us. But what we're really interested in doing now is taking Q&A and sharing any other insights that we can. And I think Stephen's going to moderate this section. Thank you.
That's great, and thanks, Nicky and Lindsey. If this was a live event, I'm sure we'd be giving you a round of applause. So please accept a virtual round of applause online from the audience. Yeah, so if you've got any questions, please use the dialogue box on the platform. I've had one through already, so this is a question to both of you, actually, to Lindsey and Nicky. And the question is, from what you've seen in your work on generations, is there anything that we should be considering in attracting this new generation of talent during and post-COVID?
I'll be happy to start with that one. We're seeing a really big difference between the millennial generation, who were born approximately between 1981 and 1996, and this new generation, which we're calling Generation Z or Generation Z, born 1997 and later, which would be current university students. A lot of it is based on the economic realities. So the university students today experienced the financial crisis as children, and now are being thrust into this new economic crisis because of COVID. So we're seeing a lot more desire to be financially secure, to find career paths where they will have a lot of future opportunities, a lot less risk taking, which was a sort of theme that we saw in millennials, was a desire to just try lots of new stuff. So a little bit more similar to maybe a World War II generation, who grew up during the Great Depression in the United States and wartime in Europe. So I think to attract that kind of a generation, I think an emphasis on security, an emphasis on support, and an emphasis on the long-term availability of university career services, a tie to their community, long-term networking and mentoring support. Very, very similar, again, to that kind of wartime mentality that we are here for you. It's going to be okay. I think that mental health piece comes in a lot that Nicky was talking about, that providing personal support as well as career support is really what I think this generation is going to be looking for. My hope, as Nicky said, is that this makes them more resilient, but I think we're at a really critical moment to try to help ensure that outcome. There are no guarantees that they're going to be okay, and I think the more that we can support them as adults in their lives and professional supporters, I think the better off they'll be.
Thanks, Lindsey. And just to add a couple of things related to the strengths that we're seeing in the COVID generation of students that were different 12 months ago. One of them is the top strength of that generation is feedback currently. And I think for people who are looking to attract and recruit, that's something to really consider. There's also an increase in curiosity by the individuals. So we might see a lot more, hopefully, exploration of jobs and things that are available to them. But there's another strength which I find fascinating because I don't have it, which is detail. And that, I think, is going to be very interesting in terms of what they might ask for and might expect whilst going through a process, because it would suggest that these times have actually increased the desire for detail. And the final one, and it speaks to Lindsey's point around kind of similarities between a World War II generation, is there's a massive increase in the service strength. And I think we've seen it with all the things that we've seen publicly happen. But certainly for this generation, appreciation of service and desire to serve has also has heavily increased.
That's great, thank you both. So I've got more questions coming through thick and fast. So the next question is from Trudy. So Trudy's asking, can you discuss how VEE might really help with diversity, attraction and support? And that's a new acronym to me, so I'm hoping that you both know what VEE stands for.
Yeah, I think she's referring to this on the other page. So what V will allow the learners to do is it's a platform where they will be able to go on and receive some of that feedback and insight that will also tell them what careers they could be really well matched to. And it will then give them a very safe place to experience some development content that normally you would see on a graduate development program, but it's loaded here. So that will allow diverse students equitable access to insights, to development. But what we see in other practices where we do strengths-based processes like this is that it typically will build confidence, and it will build clarity, and it will build the capacity to answer interview questions well and just have a greater sense of preparation. And when they then go on to potentially showcase their talent, whether that's a practice for a university or we have clients uploading showcases within the platform, we know that when we use work simulation as an assessment type, it demonstrates far greater diversity results, and it has got zero adverse impact. So we're hoping that combination of preparation and work simulation will help.
Great, thank you. Right, so I've got another question here. This one's from Antonella, and she's capitalized the words retain. I was on a webinar first thing this morning that was about giving advice to students, and I'm not sure if I was horrified or not when one of the panelists said that he advised students to stay for 2 years in their first jobs and get out to keep learning. So I think that's a lot of other employers would be a bit scared to hear that word. But the question is actually around what would your most important consideration be to engage and retaining CAPS, a multi-generation workforce. So it's not just about recruitment, it's about retaining this generation as well.
I'll start with that one. Thank you for the question. It's so important. And just some background on that advice of, stay for 2 years and get out. We have seen such a flip in the 20 years that I've been in this business from stay with an employer, show longevity, to longevity can actually backfire on you, because if you stay too long, nobody else will ever want you, right? And companies are going out of business and industries are being disrupted. There is such a fear among young people, believe it or not, that it's more of a danger to stay in one place too long. So I think that mind shift is really important to understand. Look at a site like LinkedIn, where every day you're seeing somebody else got a new job. There might be something better. The grass might be greener someplace else, right? There's just this constant desire to move and have movement. And I think a lot of that comes out of the Silicon Valley technology companies, where that just is the culture. So a little background, it doesn't mean that they are awful people who are disloyal. It's the culture that they are coming of age in. So what do you do about that? I spoke to many, many, many young people over the years in focus groups, and what they say is, no, I'm not loyal to my company, but I am loyal to people. And so I think the best thing you can do for retention is to have mentoring and internal networking and support programs where, I don't know if I'm loyal to Cappfinity, but I would do anything for Nicky Garcea, right? And I am tied to her, and I know she cares about my development. So those one-on-one personal relationships of support as early as possible in the career are so powerful. And I think back to that one quote that Nicky shared about the company that was giving people 4 mentors instead of 1 because of the virtual environment. I think that's going to have a positive impact on retention later on. That was sort of an accident of this situation. So Nicky, I'll pass it to you, but those are some thoughts from me on retention.
Thanks. I think one of the things you can do to help retention is create a very honest recruitment process at the beginning. And when you do that, I think people know on day one what they're going to get, because the process has given them insight and virtual work experience prior to them coming in. We know for graduates and apprentices that they take very early decisions in those early weeks about how much they feel like they belong. And so I think we can't, particularly at these times, and I think we had a quote that spoke to it, underemphasize that need to create belonging. And then for me, there's this piece around the psychological contract. So everything that you said in the recruitment and everything you said on the onboarding, that there is some continuation of that, because certainly in some organizations, we see a bit of separation between recruitment and development, and the ones where they see the whole piece from attraction through to maybe the end of the program as talent, then I think that's when the really good work happens in relation to retention.
Great. I've got a conscious of time, so I'll keep going through with the questions. I've got another question here that's about the career readiness strength. So the question is, what are the strengths of career readiness, and how would you best be able to assess these?
So the strengths that we have put on the V platform are, and I'll probably forget one because I do. So the first one is resilience. That is definitely key. There's personal responsibility, analysis, connector, and learning agility. Those are the 5 that are on V. Those strengths you are absolutely able to recruit for, and many people may find that at least 1 or 2 of those things are already in their platforms or their recruitment processes. What we have found historically is that those 5, particularly for graduate hiring, are there most frequently globally. And what we also know at the current time is that probably learning agility as a particular call out strength, because of the ambiguity that people are being recruited into, is very, very key. So those are the 5. They're in the V platform. You could interview for them. You could include them in situational judgment tests, in work simulations. But those are the ones that are supporting readiness at this time.
Can I just ask a question on the global nature of the work you're doing? We all took part with some others in a global webinar a few weeks ago, and I know a lot of the work that you do, both of you, Lindsey and Nicky, is on the international stage. Are you seeing, are the trends that you're seeing, does your research showing that actually as as the world, that all students are an homogenous bunch with a lot of the issues that we're talking about and traits we're talking about, or are you seeing differences from one territory to another?
I'll just address one piece of that, Stephen. Yeah, and then I'll toss it to you, Nikki. A lot of similarity globally, which I think is always gratifying to see. One of my biggest takeaways as an American is we talk all the time about diversity, equity, and inclusion, but boy, we don't talk enough about disability as a piece of that. And in our interviews with the UK, Australia, you know, in the APAC region, disability was such a prominent theme of making sure that that's part of the process. And I think we are way behind on inclusion of that community of people with disabilities. So that was something that was a key takeaway for me. Nikki, I'm sure you have others as well.
The only thing I guess to acknowledge is that as we spoke to people regionally, everyone was having a different experience of this year by virtue of the whole world is not on a kind of September start date for recruitment. So when we speak to Australia, when we speak to South Africa, they are, you know, viewing what's happening in the US and the UK with a desire to learn, and vice versa. UK and US are looking at what they have done on campuses. So that's been, I think, one of the interesting things. You can generalize, say, the strengths that we see globally, but you can't generalize the actual experience by virtue of campus recruiting. Doesn't all happen in September. So there's been a lot of cross learning, and some of the companies that really I think we found very impressive when it first started, when the pandemic first started, had already reached out to other regions to learn from the cycles that they had been in. So I think there is just a lot of benefit in more global understanding and then cross learning that can happen at these times in particular. I felt that about recruitment for many years, but I think this year has been one where actually a collaborative mindset globally can really support us in campus hiring and university hiring and recruitment.
Right. I think we've got time just for one more quick one. This is from a university perspective. So obviously, I mean, it's fairly obvious that internships, work placements aren't happening, or just aren't happening the same way, many of them virtual. And also a lot of those industries where students are able to get just generic work experience, either leisure industries, tourism, etc., you know, they're all pretty much shut down. Is there anything that universities can do to really help students get a better understanding of work, so that once they hit the sort of attraction and selection process, they're not going to miss out, particularly as you know you have other cohorts graduating in a year's time, or they may be competing with students who graduated before COVID?
I'll just say quickly, and then Nikki, I think this is an opportunity to talk about V. I heard a lot of recruiters emphasizing the skills that can be learned and demonstrated through extracurricular activities, volunteer activities. So I think we can really beef up access to that. Also, a lot of employers, AT&T comes to mind, are offering these sort of global online virtual internship opportunities. Parker Dewey with the micro internships that are allowing students to have some work experience in a way that is possible for anybody, anywhere. Nikki?
Yeah, and I would just echo that. I think that, and we will see more of this from here on in. I know a number of UK organisations who are very focused on making their attraction strategy one that is about sort of virtual work experience, and V, I guess, is following that mindset, where if we can't actually necessarily have face-to-face internships, face-to-face work experience, hopefully there'll be spring weeks, but who knows, then that gives you an opportunity to fine-tune your skills. And there are many organizations kind of giving more effort. So I would be urging universities to partner up with organizations to understand what they're offering in the attraction space that would actually fulfill some of those virtual work experiences. And then obviously also point people to V.
That's great. Thanks very much. We've covered, I think, pretty much all the questions now, and we're on the hour. So that was a really great session. Thank you both. Lots of really good insights and some great content. So thank you again from myself and from the audience. You will receive an email with a link back to this webinar and also some additional content. And I'm sure Nicky and Lindsey will be more than happy to follow up questions afterwards. Their contact details are there, and also feel free to come through us at the ISE. So thanks once again. Keep an eye on the website, because we will be doing more and more webinars as the autumn season kicks in, dealing with a lot of the issues we've been talking about here and many more to come. So hopefully meet you all virtually very soon. But thank you once again. Thank you, Lindsey, and enjoy the rest of the day. A full day for you, Lindsey, because I'm sure it's, thanks for joining us at the crack of dawn over on the, are you on the East Coast or the West Coast in the US?
I'm the East Coast, so it's 9:30 here. No worries.
Oh, okay, that's not too bad, but still a busy start to the morning for you. So thank you very much all. Talk to you all soon. Bye bye now.
Thank you. Bye bye.